and he's beaten the undefeated three-weight champion Junto Nakatani by 4, by 4, by 2. That 11th and 12th, the master changing it up and doing what he does best.
I think he did. I think he sketched out a blueprint, him and Rudy Hernandez, his good trainer, for something for the rematch, if there is a rematch, to be able to feel good about. You know, yeah, you can control the outside, but you gotta do it with a little bit more of an aggressive jab. You want to keep that range, but you want to do it by backing him up a little bit in spots. Don't let him get that far ahead. And when you back him up again, you can have your cake and eat it too. You could be aggressive and still be the taller guy, still be the longer guy. You just have to make sure you execute properly. And I think, again, that that they probably would feel very good about a rematch. Obviously, that's going to be up to Inoue, and of course the promoters involved with him. They did a good job on the cut, by the way. You know that, Bud? We didn't even talk about it. I know it happened, you know, with only 2 rounds left, 3, 2.5, whatever. But they did a good job with that cut, stopping the bleeding.
All right, Inoue wins a unanimous decision, 116, 112 twice, 115, 113. It was a tale of like 2 fights. Early on, Nakatani wasn't doing much. Inoue actually out-jabbed Nakatani in this fight, which is not a good recipe for Nakatani. Inoue's been on the stage for a way longer time than Nakatani. He's just quicker, he's faster, he has a better ring IQ, he's got more metal in there. Inoue won this fight, and he did it in convincing fashion. Nakatani had some moments late. He's going to wish he started a lot earlier. Where was his jab? I don't get it, but this is about Inoue. He's now 28-0 in world championship fights. Bring on that BAM fight at this point. Just keep it rolling with these mega fights. But Inoue is the man. He's top pound for pound. Good stuff from Naoya Inoue.
Inoue and Nakatani was a
2-pack of ass. That stinks.
Horrible fight, disgusting at the highest level. I'm confused why Inoue is above Shakur Stevenson, above Devin Haney. Why is Nakatani above David Benavidez? Boxing politics at its finest. I was disgusted at the fight. I thought it was overrated. Inoue wins with the unanimous decision. I thought it was musty and disgusting at the highest level. And on top of that, it made us get up early in the morning. I could have been in bed getting some extra Z's. But get this, the fight did not live up to the hype at all. For those guys to be pound for pound fighters and to be elite, for us to wake up at motherfucking 2:30 in the morning and watch this farce of a fight is absolutely musty and disgusting, and I'm absolutely horrified at the highest level. Inoue beats Nakatani, but I'm just visually disgusted. Y'all let me know what y'all think.
The monster did what the monster does. Naoya Inoue walked out of the biggest fight in Japanese boxing history with a unanimous decision victory over Junto Nakatani, extending his unbeaten world championship record to 28-0, and adding another name to a resume that keeps building the case for his position at the absolute summit of pound-for-pound boxing. The scorecards read 116-112 twice and 115-113. A comfortable margin on paper. A fight that played out in genuinely 2 distinct phases in reality, and that ended with a cut that required serious medical attention in the final rounds, adding one more dramatic element to a night that did not need additional tension to justify every ticket sold and every alarm set around the world. But here is where the conversation gets interesting, because the reaction to this fight has been almost as divided as the reaction to any fight in recent memory. On one side, you have the analysts and former champions who watched Inoue operate with intelligence, adaptability, and the specific elite-level composure that defines genuinely great fighters, and who came away from the evening with their existing admiration deepened. On the other side, you have voices that looked at the same fight and found it boring, overrated, and unworthy of the hype that preceded it. And in the middle, you have the most important analytical question the result generates. Does this performance, convincing but not spectacular, put Inoue above Usyk as the pound-for-pound #1 in boxing? The tale of two fights framing is the most accurate available description of how this bout actually unfolded rather than how its pre-fight build suggested it might. The early rounds belong to Inoue in the specific and clinical way that reflects his ring intelligence rather than his knockout power. He out-jabbed Nakatani. That single fact is the most telling statistic from the entire fight because Nakatani's entire tactical system, the bow and arrow approach that Tim Bradley had described in detail before the bout, is built around the jab as its foundational measuring and controlling instrument. If you lose the jab battle against Inoue, you lose the fight's primary weapon before you have had a genuine opportunity to deploy it. Nakatani did not make the jab work early. He was passive, content to box cautiously from range, which is theoretically the correct approach against someone as explosive and dangerous as Inoue, but which in practice meant surrendering the early rounds to an opponent whose ring IQ is extraordinary enough to punish passivity just as effectively as he punishes aggression. The championship experience gap that multiple analysts had identified before the fight as Inoue's most decisive advantage showed up immediately and clearly in those first rounds. Inoue has been in this exact environment, with this specific quality of pressure on every exchange, more times than Nakatani has. And that accumulated experience of operating under the specific weight of fighting the best available opposition at the highest level expresses itself in the opening rounds, in ways that all the preparation in the world cannot fully replicate. The late rounds were a different story. Nakatani found something in the second half of the fight that the first half had not shown, a willingness to engage more directly, to take more initiative, to try to impose the specific qualities that had made him a credible challenger, rather than simply surviving in a fight he had let Inoue control. He began taking the fight to the champion in ways that created genuine moments of competitive tension, and that produced enough visible impact on the scorecards to give at least one judge reason to see the fight closer than the other two did. Tim Bradley's pre-fight analysis about Nakatani needing to start earlier, to use his jab aggressively rather than conservatively and back Inoue up in spots, was largely accurate as a description of what the challenger needed to do and largely absent from his actual approach, until it was too late to change the fight's fundamental trajectory. Tim Bradley's tactical breakdown was the most detailed and the most accurate predictive analysis of the fight's dynamics. His identification of Nakatani's defensive exit pattern, the way he drops his level and pulls back when pressure arrives rather than maintaining his position and creating counter opportunities from a stable base, proved to be exactly the vulnerability that the fight exposed under championship conditions. Bradley described it as something subtle requiring a real smart eye to identify. The pattern creates a dual-edged problem for Nakatani. It can set up a big counter shot if the timing is perfect and the opponent is committing into the movement, but it more frequently creates a position of compromised balance and compromised head stability that turns his defensive retreat into an opportunity for his opponent rather than a problem for them. Against Inoue specifically, whose first step is among the quickest in boxing, and whose offensive transitions from reset positions to explosive combination sequences happen faster than the defensive adjustment Nakatani's exit pattern requires, the tactical limitation Bradley identified was a genuine competitive problem rather than a minor stylistic quirk. Nakatani's system works effectively when he can control the distance from outside range, when his jab is doing the measuring work it is designed to do, and when opponents are coming into him on his terms rather than disrupting his timing with their own explosive first step. Against Inoue, none of those conditions held consistently enough for his system to function at the efficiency it showed against lesser opposition. Bradley's observation about Inoue's evolution across fights adding multiple layers of strategic optionality is the element of his analysis that the result most comprehensively validated. Inoue is not the same fighter from fight to fight. He adapts. He adds tools. He came to the West Coast to learn different approaches. He incorporates pull counters and outside boxing and pressure fighting, and counterpunching sequences in combinations that shift from round to round based on what his opponent is presenting. Against Nakatani specifically, his ability to win the jab battle in the early rounds while maintaining sufficient defensive awareness to avoid the specific offshore counter shots that Nakatani's system generates was the expression of that multi-layered evolution in competitive practice. The cut is the detail that provided the final dramatic element, and that tested the operational capacity of the corner team in circumstances that could have changed the fight's outcome in ways that the competitive action alone was not generating. Arriving in the later rounds with Inoue already ahead on all three scorecards. A cut of sufficient severity to require serious attention represents exactly the kind of complication that elite boxing camps prepare for specifically, because the consequences of handling it inadequately are immediate and potentially decisive. The corner team managed it. Bradley noted it explicitly. The job they did stopping the bleeding in the final rounds allowed the fight to reach its natural conclusion without the additional uncertainty that an uncontrolled cut can create for both fighters and judges simultaneously. The cut also adds a dimension to the rematch conversation that the scorecards alone do not fully generate. If the fight had been stopped or scored differently because of the cut, the circumstances surrounding the result would have created the specific kind of unresolved competitive question that makes immediate rematches commercially logical and competitively compelling. Even with the fight reaching its full 12 rounds and the unanimous decision providing clarity on the result, the knowledge that the cut was present and was serious adds a layer of what if to any future conversation about this matchup. Mike Coppinger's argument that a convincing Inoue victory in this fight would justify moving him above Usyk to the pound-for-pound #1 position is the most commercially and analytically significant question the result generates. His specific framing of why this moment represents the clearest available opportunity for that argument is worth engaging with honestly rather than simply accepting or dismissing based on existing positions. The comparison he draws is about what each man's most recent competitive activity demonstrates. Inoue beating Nakatani, a three-weight world champion, undefeated coming in, the biggest fight Japanese boxing had ever produced, represents a genuine elite-level competitive test, regardless of whether the fight itself was spectacular or conservative in its tactical texture. Usyk's next fight involves Rico Verhoeven, whose professional boxing record consists of 1 fight against a 0 and 5 opponents conducted over a decade ago. In terms of strengthening a boxing resume, the competitive quality of what Inoue is doing and what Usyk is doing in this specific period are simply not equivalent regardless of Usyk's overall career achievement and his status as the undisputed heavyweight champion. The counterargument is that pound-for-pound rankings exist to acknowledge achievement across different weight classes and different competitive histories, rather than simply to evaluate the most recent performance in isolation. Usyk's record, the Joshua fights, the Fury fight, the undisputed championship across 2 weight classes, represents an accumulation of elite-level achievement that Inoue's record at lower weight classes, however impressive, has not yet been tested against comparable opposition in terms of the specific physical challenges that heavyweight boxing generates. The quality of the men Usyk has beaten, in terms of their physical attributes and their competitive credentials, represents a different category of challenge from the men Inoue has beaten even when both are world champions with impressive records. Both positions have genuine merit. The resolution of the debate ultimately requires a judgment call about what pound for pound means conceptually, whether it rewards the most comprehensive recent activity or the deepest accumulated legacy. and that judgment call is legitimately contested in ways that make the ongoing debate more interesting than a clean answer would be. The most entertaining response to the fight, delivered with a specific energy that made its own argument about entertainment value in boxing analysis, described the Inoue Nakatani fight as musty and disgusting. Horrible. A farce that required waking up at 2:30 in the morning and delivered nothing worthy of the alarm being set. The specific comparison to Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney as fighters who deserve pound-for-pound positioning above Inoue, and David Benavidez as a fighter who should rank above Nakatani, reflects a genuine alternative analytical framework rather than simply a contrarian position for its own sake. The entertainment argument is real. Two elite technical boxers meeting in a championship fight often produces competitive precision rather than explosive drama. The specific qualities that make Inoue and Nakatani elite, their ring intelligence, their tactical discipline, their ability to impose specific systems across 12 rounds, are sometimes the exact qualities that prevent a fight from delivering the kind of immediate visceral entertainment that casual audiences and some hardcore fans find most satisfying. A fight that is decided by who wins the jab battle in the opening rounds, and whose championship experience advantage expresses itself through accumulated technical competence, is a good fight by one set of evaluative standards and a disappointing fight by another. The honest assessment sits somewhere between the two extreme positions. It was not a great fight in the specific sense that it generated extended periods of mutual danger and explosive bilateral exchanges that changed the fight's momentum repeatedly. It was a very good performance by Inoue, demonstrating the specific qualities that elite ring generalship at championship level produces when deployed against a credible but outclassed opponent. And it was a fight that Nakatani might look back on and believe he had the tools to make more competitive than he allowed it to become in the first half, when the passivity that his tactical system sometimes defaults to under pressure cost him rounds he needed and could not recover. Malik Scott's pre-fight position that Nakatani was not as big an underdog as the betting odds suggested, and that someone with his technical system and work rate should never be approached as a significant underdog regardless of what the numbers say, proved partially correct in the sense that Nakatani competed seriously across 12 rounds and made enough of the fight his own in the later stages to justify the competitive respect. It proved incorrect in the sense that the margin on the scorecards reflected a genuine Inoue dominance that Scott's framing perhaps underweighted relative to the quality and experience gap the champion brought to this specific encounter. The 28-0 World Championship record, achieved against the best available opposition across multiple weight classes, is the most direct available answer to any question about whether this result validated Inoue's position at the summit of the pound-for-pound conversation. Ryan Garcia's instinct that you simply cannot go wrong picking Inoue is the fan expression of the same analytical conclusion that Bradley and Oladipo and Coppinger arrived at through more detailed route. The specific combination of explosive power, championship resilience, tactical evolution, and the ability to come back from adversity and still find the finishing moment is the profile of a generational talent operating at the height of his competitive powers. The next fight is the question that the boxing world immediately moved to once the final scorecards were read. Bam Rodriguez is the name that multiple voices mentioned in the immediate post-fight analysis as the fight that would most completely test Inoue's current position and most directly address the remaining competitive questions about his ceiling. That fight, whenever it gets made, will be watched with the specific attention that comes from knowing that both men involved have the capability to end things suddenly from anywhere in the ring, and that the competitive questions between them are genuinely unresolved in the specific way that makes a fight feel necessary, rather than simply commercially attractive. Drop your prediction in the comments. Was this a disappointing performance relative to the hype, or exactly what a championship fight between two elite technical boxers should look like? And does Inoue above Usyk at pound for pound #1 make sense to you now? Let the debate run.